Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Troy Baker. I'm the director of the Better Business Bureau Educational Foundation. I want to thank everybody for joining us for this webinar, welcoming back the workforce. A couple housekeeping things before we get started. Everybody is on mute. The presentation is being recorded. I'm looking at the little recording button right now to make sure it's there. We will take questions at the end of the presentation. So if you have questions, please type them into the questions section of the panel there, as you see on the slide, and we will get to them at the end. We will also send out a resource packet and a link to this presentation. And I know John's got some resources that he's going to share, and we will get all that out to you after the presentation is done. So you'll be able to use this information going forward. John, if you could advance the next slide, please. I will introduce and hand off our presenters, John. And to begin with, we'll start with Phil Catlett, President and CEO of the Better Business Bureau Serving Western Michigan.
Thanks, Troy, and welcome everybody. You know, getting back to work in ways that sustain the culture, the brand, the quality of your operation, the financials. I mean, there's a lot going on here, and there's going to be a lot of work and thought required to do it well. And you think about the imagery of your business to your employees and to your customers, and how do you do that in this time of change? And you know, our team's asking me for what's our back to work plan, and I'm thinking to myself, well, you know, that depends a lot on government regulations. It depends on what's going on safety-wise with COVID, and are we going to have another outbreak, and how confident are people getting? We need a lot of thoughtful and collaborative planning to do this well, and know that we're going to have to be flexible as it goes along. And that's why BBB asked John Kuning, Director of Manufacturing Excellence from Express Employment, to be our presenter today. How do we welcome our people back in the wisest and most effective way? How can they feel safe, valued, respected, and known, which is so important to each and every one of us? So Grand Rapids-based Express Employment is national award-winning. They continue to grow their services and expertise to provide a variety of valuable assets to businesses. We're grateful to them today for being BBB accredited and for sharing their wisdom with us. John, please take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Phil. I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Phil and Troy and the BBB for having me this morning as we talk about restarting our businesses. As mentioned, my name is John Kuning. I'm the Director of Manufacturing Excellence at Express Employment Professionals here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's my pleasure to be with you this morning. So again, welcome everybody. Before we get too much further, let me say this. We at Express recognize that everybody that we're talking to is in a different place right now, emotionally, financially, mentally, physically, geographically. We want you to know that no matter where you are in all of these areas, underlying the informational conversations is our Express Care Promise pillar of being compassionate. Sometimes these conversations might sound a little cold and impersonal, and I get that, but I want you to know how deeply we care about your well-being and the well-being of every worker who's under your care. And we know that behind every question, behind every unique situation, behind every story, behind every situation is a real person. And I just want us all to just be aware of that and to think on that as we move forward. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, Express Employment Professionals is a premier workforce solution provider. Each office is one of over 820 franchises across North America, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. And we stand ready to serve you with recruiting and staffing services for light industrial positions, skilled trade positions, administrative positions, and professional positions. And we can also support you with coaching, training, manufacturing consulting, safety consulting, leadership development, employee well-being, and HR solutions and consulting, mostly driven out of our Grand Rapids office training division. Our goal today, as always, is to provide as much value as we can for your organization. We aren't COVID-19 experts, but we are workforce experts, and if sharing our knowledge and information helps you in any way, then we'll consider the morning a great success. So again, thank you for being with us this morning, and welcome again. So what we're going to do this morning is we're going to talk about re-onboarding, and it's we decided a couple of weeks ago we didn't know if that was really a word or not, but it is now. We made it up. It's re-onboarding. We're going to talk about re-onboarding and recalibrating the workforce. We're going to talk about what we should expect from our returning workers. We're going to talk about what the returning workers should expect from us when we think about re-onboarding and recalibrating. And we're going to talk about the new world of safety and what that means. What should we have prepared? How do we start preparing? How do we go about continuing to prepare? And then we'll talk for just a minute about ongoing health and safety. So just kind of a summary of what we'll go over this morning. Again, if there's any questions, type them into the question and answer part of the panel. Troy will monitor all of that. And as we get done presenting our material information, we'll take whatever questions we have time for. So that's the outline of this morning. So we're going to talk mostly from an operations side of the conversation here this morning, not so much the HR part. We'll be doing another little HR segment on Friday in a different webinar. If you're interested in that, let me know. But we're going to talk about the operations side of it here this morning, the leadership side, the business side of it, and how do we get people back on board into the operations part of it. My background is in manufacturing. I spent most of my career in manufacturing. But this conversation is absolutely relevant to any business as we consider what it means to start ramping back up. And it really has special meaning to businesses that are smaller in nature, as I know many of the members are part of small businesses. And what does it mean for small businesses as well as the large? So I want to start off with this. I always want to start off with a little bit of a positive note and some optimism as we move forward, that there is some hope for the future in the next days, the next weeks and months. I'm not talking about the wring our hands, I hope this works out kind of hope, but I do want to talk about the knowledge that this will happen kind of hope. There's an optimism starting to brew, and there's always a resiliency within, especially West Michigan businesses, that keeps an optimism and a forward-facing optimism as we move into whatever future starts to look like and whatever our new reality will be. So our hope for the future is this: we're going to resume working. Whatever the new reality is going to look like, we're going to resume working. And the workforce is anxious to be here. They're anxious to work. They're ready to work. And we certainly hear the stories over and over again here as we work with placing folks into jobs, that the workforce is anxious and ready to go back to work. So that's a true optimistic hope for us. And we have learned something. We've become better companies through all of this, and we'll continue to become better companies as innovations come out of all of this, and as new ways of doing business come out of all of this. I'm convinced that we're going to have all learned and become better at what we do and better at who we are as we move forward. So I do want to start out our Monday morning together with at least that note of optimism from my chair, that there's a hope for the future and that there's a bright future for us in the West Michigan BBB community and area for sure. So what should we expect? What should we expect from the returning workforce? And this is a conversation that I have had multiple times over the past few weeks, and it's one that does give us pause as we think about this. When we think about, what does our business have to do and what do we have to do within our walls, let's not forget about what we should expect from the returning workforce and what's going on out there in the world. So a couple of things we have to consider when we consider the condition of that returning workforce. First of all, consider this: they've been off the job for a while. And everybody's condition is different. Some have been laid off, some have been furloughed, some have been just sent home to continue their jobs but working remotely. But the reality is, for a lot of our workforce, they've been off the job for some period of time, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. They've been away from the job for a little while, and we have to understand and we have to be prepared for the fact that they're stepping back into the workforce, having been away from it for just a little while. And for many of the workers out there in that condition right now, with the unemployment rates being what they had been for a little while, that's been a new condition for them, to be away from work and not being part of that regular schedule or part of that regular routine. And we have to just be aware that one of the conditions of the returning workforce is that they've been away for a little while. Next one I want us to consider is this: they've been through some of the same stresses as we as organizations have been. And as individuals, as individual contributors, individual workers, as breadwinners, and all of the things that go along, the stresses that the incoming workforce has felt over the past days and weeks, maybe even way more than what the businesses have felt. And they are under a tremendous amount of stress as they make decisions about who's going to go back to work, who's going to watch the kids, what are we going to do that school's not in session, How are we going to continue educating? What are we going to do until daycare comes back into play? How are we going to stay safe? How are we going to pay the bills? How are we going to make rent? These are the stresses that the workforce is living with and dealing with, and these are, quite honestly, the stresses, only a few of the stresses that they're going to be coming back to the workplace carrying that load of stress from the outside world, as well as the stresses that are coming into play as they watch the news, as they kind of take in and process information, and as they come back into work and walk back into our front doors, what's going to happen with that stress level? Is it going to grow? Is it going to start to diminish? Or what are we going to have be faced with as we think about the stress on the workforce? It's going to be there, and it's going to be real. The other thing that I want us to think about as we think about the workforce is they are weary. Just like all of us listening here today, talking today, we're weary. We're weary of being in the condition, and we're weary of all the new stuff that comes at us every day, the news, the numbers, everything else does make us very, very exhausted mentally and emotionally. They're also very wary. Not only weary, but wary. They're cautious about what they're seeing. They're not sure about what the leadership is all up to. They're not sure what it means to step back into the condition of working in a possibly unsafe. So they're cautious. They're also in need, right? They're in need to be working again, and the workforce is aware of that. They desperately want that. They're in need to be back to work, to have the routine, to have the schedules, to have the income, to have all the things that help their world work the way it should. They need to be working. Now, having said that, they're also nervous. They're nervous about what to expect. They're nervous about health. They're nervous about safety, finances. They're nervous about the next pandemic. They're nervous about what it's going to mean to re-engage with people they haven't seen in a while. They're nervous about what it's going to mean to engage with leadership. So let's just be very aware that the things we can expect from the returning workforce are all of those kinds of things. The other thing is I want us to be aware of and to think about, and again, I don't know everybody's condition, but we should not expect that the same people who left us at the beginning of the shutdowns are the same ones that are going to be coming back. And I say that carefully, and I say that on purpose. There may have been some turnover and some attrition during this time, so the people who are coming back to you might not be the ones who left your organization. They might be entirely brand new to your organization, and we have to bear that in mind as we think about re-onboarding. And we'll get to that in just a second. And we should expect that they don't know exactly what the new world looks like for them. They're not sure what it's going to look like when they come back to a place that maybe is familiar to them because they worked for you for a while, and it might be different now, so they're not sure what that's going to look like. So that little sign you see there on the slide, I think, is what we can expect. We can expect that our returning workforce might feel a little lost, confused, a little perplexed, a little disoriented, a little bewildered. People who have been working for you suddenly find themselves in a condition of being new again and have to figure out what that means to be part of something new, even though they may have been with you for a while. The other thing I want us to be really aware of, and I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about when I say this, but I don't want it to go unsaid either. We're also going to find that as our workforce comes back together and we start to be kind of our work families again, that there may be some differing views and differing opinions about what has just happened and what might now happen in the future. Some might think this whole thing has been a little bit ridiculous and overblown and even a hoax. Others may be taking this very, very seriously, wanting to make sure that every I is dotted and T is crossed. And we're going to have these differing opinions coming back together into the workplace and into the workforce with lots of different opinions going on. And we have to be ready for that. We have to think about what different opinions mean and how do we make sure that opinions are taken care of with facts and make sure that everybody has had a chance to be heard and make sure that we're accommodating everything that needs to be accommodated. And my sense is this won't be it won't be an impossible task, but it won't necessarily be the easiest task either. But I want us to just be aware that different opinions are going to come back into the building. People who maybe have been apart from each other with their different opinions are now going to be in the same room and the same building with each other, and we have to worry about that a little bit. We should expect questions. We should expect some worry. We should expect maybe even a little bit of anger, a little bit of bitterness. We may have some of those who want to kind of rage against the system. We just have to kind of be aware of that. We might see some hesitation in some folks as they come back into the workplace, where they're not sure if this is exactly where they want to be, or if they're ready to be in this condition, or if the organization is ready to have them back in the new conditions. So what should we expect from the return to workforce? All of that, right? And we just have to start putting that into our filters of how are we going to welcome back the workplace and the workforce. And as you start narrowing that down to the individual worker, as we start figuring out who and what they need for us to ramp back up into doing business. So what should they expect from us? And when I say us, I'm talking about organizations, I'm talking about leaders and leadership teams. What should they expect as they start thinking about coming back to work? And I think one of the things our workforce should expect from us is a confidence. I think they need to be confident or see a confidence in us as leaders, and I think they will expect us to have a confidence that what's happening is the right thing and that we're okay with what's going on. So I think we as leaders really need to kind of exude a confidence. Something Phil said just a minute ago is he said, as we start thinking about what is the plan for bringing people back in and how are we going to start to really ramp into that, I want to challenge all of us here this morning, especially as leaders and influencers in the company. This is the time between now and whenever it is that you're going to start bringing your workforce back into place. This is the time to come together and spend time making your plan and getting your return to work day put together. All right, this is the time to do that. The time to do that is not on day one of a return when you suddenly have 3 or 4 or 5 or 20 or whatever the number is, people standing on their sidewalk ready to come back into work, and you find yourself a bit unprepared. I'm going to just challenge us to say, now is the time to come together as leaders so we can start building this confidence that we need in the plan that we're going to put together. The second thing that they're going to expect from us is understanding. It's new for them, it's new for us, it's new for the organization. Whatever the new is going to look like, we have to be a little bit understanding of that situation, and we have to be understanding of what everyone is going to show up as. They're going to expect an understanding if they're not exactly, if they don't exactly have their home life schedules figured out all the way. Lots of moving parts, and I think that they're going to expect a certain amount of understanding from us as businesses and us as leaders. They're going to expect a confidence from us and in us. They're going to expect some understanding from us and in us. An explanation of everything new. This is huge for us to stop and think about. A complete rundown of everything new and everything that's still as it was. This is the time where we can really leave nothing to chance. Because when we think about this, we have incumbent workers who have been essential and maybe have never left the employment scene here for the past few weeks. We have those who have continued to work but have worked remotely. We have those who have been furloughed and laid off and they haven't been working and they're coming back into play. And we have new employees coming into our organizations perhaps. For all of those, everything that we're going to be doing is not going to be exactly the same as it was. And this is why I say it's time to re-onboard. We have to take everybody into play and everybody into the confidence of conversation and give them a complete rundown of what they can expect and what's going on. Treat this as a new beginning for your organization and treat everybody as if they were newly coming into your organization and do a great job of re-onboarding. My suggestion here is, and has been and continues to be, if you take those groups of people, the incumbent workers who haven't left, those who have worked from home, those who have been laid off or furloughed, those who are brand new to your organization, if you treat them all as your new workforce and bring them back into the conversation of here's what's going on in our organization, I wouldn't separate and talk to each group individually. I would mix and match them a little bit as your meetings are allowed to do from a space constraint. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I would really start to mix and match the different mindsets of the people coming back so you can have conversations about what's new and what's right and what's happening and what the plan is, instead of letting them have conversations amongst themselves. As Phil and I were talking, sometimes imaginations are more interesting than the truth, but if we can bring people together and really tell the true story of what's new, I would certainly think about re-onboarding your organization as if it were all new. They're also going to expect a vision for the future. They're going to want to know, how are we going to dig out of this? When will we be financially whole? What's in the works, or what's being planned, or what's understood for whatever comes next? Is there a vision for the future? Your workforce kind of always wants to know this, right? But I think more importantly than ever, as we talk about this coming back into play, do you have a vision for what that all looks like, and can you start to really spin that out to them in a great way where they are confident and understand what's going on in their world as well? Next thing that they're going to expect from us is a safety protocol. We'll get into that in just a minute. The next thing they're going to expect is a cleanliness plan. The workforce can't come back to work and see that we have not cleaned, or that we're not providing a way for them to be clean and to sanitize and to be safe from a cleanliness standpoint. And you guys all know what I'm talking about when I say cleanliness in today's vocabulary. It's not just sweeping up the dust. It's what have we done to help mitigate the risk of virus and sickness within our organizations. And our workforce is going to expect that from us. The folks from their workforce families who aren't coming to our workplace, but they're staying at home, or they're at a different job or whatever, they're also expecting that their significant other, or their spouse, or their loved one, or their friend, or whatever, is going to go off to a safe workplace. We have a larger responsibility to make sure that everything is safe and clean. And honestly, they're going to expect it from us. As we here at Express in our office, we're beginning to think about bringing people back. The question I'm hearing from my coworkers is, what are you doing in the office to make sure that it's clean and safe for us to be there? And that's going to be on everybody's mind. The last thing that they're going to expect from us is preparedness. And this is what I'm saying. Now is the time to come together and get prepared. Make a plan, know the plan, work the plan. When they show up back to work in whatever condition that is, if they can hear, the first things that we as leaders tell them is, here's what we've been working on. Here's the plan. Here's what we're going to do moving forward. Here's how we're going to do safety. Here's how we're going to prepare for the next threat or opportunity that comes along. The more we can be prepared, the more that message is going to ring true and optimistically with our workforce. And I truly believe that if we can give them these things, confidence, understanding, explanations, vision, safety, cleanliness, preparedness, I think we're going to be in a much better place. This is the time to lead by example. This is the time to be really good at being prepared. This is the time to lead by management, lead by planning. People are going to understand and recognize that we're ready for them when we do that, and they should get way more from us than even what they're expecting. Very interesting conversation that you need to have with each other and with your leadership teams on how to get ready for that. My other piece of advice has been, and will continue to be this: approach their first day back positively. Really have a positive approach about that first day back. Just because the new workplace might now include things like masks and cleaning stations and personal distancing and new protocols and whatever the new workplace means, it doesn't mean we can't greet the workforce positively. Celebrate that you're back as an organization. Celebrate that they're back. Be glad to see them. Be honestly optimistic about the future. There's no condition out there that's going to preclude us from being positive and optimistic about what it is that we're trying to do. And I think if we approach everybody's first day back from a really positive standpoint, I think it's great. Give us a great start. This is going to be important. It's going to go a long way to help with success. It might even be part of your plan and part of the way to dispel some of the differing opinions. If you can create a first day back tone of positivity, optimism, some shared experience successes, genuine belief that all will be well, I think you're going to be a long ways down the road of having a really, really good restart and a lot less of the possible problems that could come from other kinds of conversation. Be positive about this. Be optimistic about this first day back. The first thing that we don't want to, we don't have the first thing that happens when someone walks up to the door is, we say, put your mask on and let me check your temperature. And that's our starting point. I think we can be much more positive and optimistic, even though those things may have to happen. Let's treat this first day with just a bunch of positivity, and it's going to help us. This is the big topic. This is the conversation that more people are having than ever, or than any other conversation, is the new safe workplace. What is this going to look like, and how do we accomplish this? How do we do this if we're a large organization and we have just a lot of ground to cover? How do we do this if we're a small organization and we don't have a lot of resource? But believe it or not, this is going to be on everybody's mind as they return. They are going to have safety on their mind in ways that probably they have not had before. And I don't think any of us think any differently, or any of us are any different when we think about going out into the public and being safe. Your workers are going to feel the same way. And they may not all say it. They may need the job bad enough where they just really don't want to verbalize that they're concerned, but they're going to certainly be thinking about safety. And what we have to do as organizations, as leaders within organizations, is we have to make sure that they arrive to a new, solid safety protocol. And again, not making it up as they arrive, but having it in place when they get there. Are there going to be temperature checks? Well, what's that going to look like? Will there be sanitizing stations? And what will that look like? And how will those things be resourced? Are masks going to be required, or are masks going to be voluntary under certain conditions as the stay-at-home order dictates? Where are we going to put barriers or droplet screens? Where will they be needed, and will they be in place? Are we going to create an ability to work 6 feet apart? Will we be able to take breaks safely? And all of those kinds of things. How are we going to occupy the lunchroom? What are the shift starts going to look like? If we have 60 people showing up for work at the same time of day and using one doorway, how do we keep 60 people 6 feet apart as they enter the workforce? And this is what I'm talking about when I talk about having a plan in place and having some understanding that it might not go exactly like it used to go. As far as things like timeliness through time cards and time clocks and all of those kinds of things. But they're going to want to arrive to this new safety protocol. And we can't have them come back to see us as leaders and as organizations ignoring the rules and ignoring the recommendations. They need to see us being lockstep with our rules, lockstep with the recommendations, lockstep with our own safety protocol, so we can keep our credibility and our trust at the level that we need them to be. As we think about this. So this is the time. This is the time for us to shine. This is the time for us to shine as leaders and to really lead well. So let's talk about safety here a little bit more. And let's talk about it from a couple of standpoints. First of all, what's required? And I always go back to OSHA and look at what OSHA has to say about safety in general. And when we think about their general duty clause that was written a long time ago, the general duty clause requires employers to provide employees with a workplace free from recognized hazards likely to cause death or serious physical harm. And that's the big overarching umbrella of the general duty clause. And this general duty clause now includes things like pandemics and violence in the workplace and active shooter scenarios and maybe other items that haven't even been thought about when this clause was first written. But we still have the responsibility to provide employees with a workplace free from recognized hazards likely to cause death or serious physical harm. And we have to walk into this next segment or this next chapter of our company's story with this firmly in mind. Now, at the bottom of this screen, and we'll get this when this comes out to you, as Troy said, you'll get all this information, so you don't have to worry about writing this down or anything. But that website that I have down there at the bottom, osha.gov/publication/OSHA 3990. This is a wonderful document that has been published by OSHA that gives some guidelines about how to make this thing work. It's a really good document. The reason I'm not showing it or putting it up here this morning on the screen is it's like 35 pages long. There's kind of a lot of, words, and that's how some of these reports work. But it's a really, really good document for us to go look at and use as a resource. And what's nice about it, one of the things that's nice about it is it's a guidance. It's not a standard or a regulation. It doesn't create new legal obligations. It's just a recommendation and some descriptions on how to get us through this next chapter of creating a safe workplace. Some of the things that you'll find in this publication, I'll just kind of hit some of the chapters, and hopefully this will start to reassure you a little bit that there are resources out there to help. As Phil said, as we start thinking about our plans and where to start, this is a really nice place to start. Because these steps, the document starts out talking about steps that all employers can take to reduce workers' risk of exposure. And then it starts going into some chapters. Develop an infectious disease preparedness and response plan. I don't know about all of you, but if a year ago you'd have told me that we'd be talking about and using language like infectious disease preparedness, I'm not sure I would have believed you. But here we are, and we are talking about it. And one of the things that this document tells us is how to go about creating that infectious disease preparedness and response plan, and it gives some steps on what that might mean. The second chapter that it has in that same vein is preparing to implement basic infection prevention measures, promote frequent and thorough hand washing, for example, and, including providing workers, customers, worksite visitors, and normal workers in your workforce. It talks about the basic infection prevention measures. It also talks about developing policies and procedures for prompt identification and isolation of sick people, if appropriate. And again, not a conversation that we've always had and that we're likely to have had naturally and normally. But when we start thinking about where we are today, we have to have that policy and that procedure in place for prompt identification. And we have to keep in mind all the things human that go along with this. We have to be very careful with confidentiality. We have to be careful with how we treat people's health information and records and all of those kinds of things. But we need to have that procedure, that policy in place to identify and isolate people who are sick, whether they are COVID symptoms or something else. But we have to be able to deal with that. This document helps walk through some of those concerns, so it's really, really helpful. Next thing it suggests is develop and implement and communicate about workplace flexibilities and protections. And we're going to hit this again in just a few minutes from another angle as I give you another tool to work with. But this is very important that we communicate about what those things are going to be within our workforce. What will the sick policy look like? Is it going to change? How are we going to continue to actively encourage sick people to stay home? Can we be flexible and still consistent with our sick leave policies? How can we handle all of that? This OSHA document gives us some great guidelines about that, and again, I'm going to suggest taking a look at that. That's on page 11 of their 35 pages, where they talk about developing and communicating workplace flexibilities. I'm going to give you another tool here shortly that helps with the same thing. The last thing I want to just point out about this OSHA document is it talks about implementing workplace controls. And occupational and safety health folks who work in this field, EHS professionals, they talk about the framework, and some of you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, the hierarchy of controls. And then in the world of safety and health, the hierarchy of controls is to select ways of controlling workplace hazards. The best way to control a hazard is to remove it from the workplace rather than relying on workers to reduce it. Now, we understand that with what we're faced with today, the pandemic and all of that, we really don't have a way to eliminate the threat from our workplace, so we have to go down to the next level of the hierarchy and so on, and that's how this thing works. So it's going to talk about the measures that are the most effective to the least effective in that order. Engineering controls, we're just going to talk about the building, installing air filters and increasing ventilation and installing physical barriers. Sneeze guards and droplet guards and all of that is engineering controls. And then it wants to talk about administrative controls, to help control how we handle the sick worker, encouraging them to stay home and minimizing contact among the workers. And then it goes all the way down into safe work practices and PPE. So some really nicely laid out information in that document that I'm going to just encourage you all to spend a few minutes with, and maybe give you some guidance about how to start and what to do next from a kind of a high level OSHA standpoint. It's called OSHA 3990. And it points us to the general duty clause of how to stay safe. And again, don't worry about that document. It's not new regulation or punitive. It's simply recommendation. It's really, really nicely done. So there you go. A plug for OSHA. This is one of the books I like to read upon occasion because I'm always amazed that 4th century BC China at war and 4th century BC Chinese war expert strategist sounds an awful lot like 21st century business here in America. And I'm always intrigued by reading Sun Tzu and The Art of War. And I don't think you could find a quote more appropriate right now for us than this. Victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. And it's exactly what I'm talking about here this morning. Spend the time this week, next week, whatever the time frame is before your return to work, and become as prepared as you can. Be this victorious warrior because you've already won. You've already put together the plan that's going to take you to the level that's going to work. The companies that are going to struggle, and the companies that do struggle and that we talk to every day who are in a kind of in a position of struggling, are the ones who have said, yes, we're going to come back to work. They open the doors to the workers come in, and they don't have a plan in place. So this is a very appropriate thing to think about from 4th century BC China. Now let's be prepared. Leaders, prepare. Now the other tool that I have for you guys this morning, and we'll send this out after the webinar, we'll make sure this is available to everybody, is a checklist that we've developed that really takes some of the stuff from that OSHA plan and some of the just stuff from just experience that we've been working with and as many experts in the workforce as we can find, and we created this checklist. Now it's 2 sides, it's not 35 pages long, it's 2 sides of it 8.5 by 11, and it's a return to work checklist. I'm going to make that available for everybody, and so you can use it. And just to give you some highlights of it, and again, I don't have it on the screen because it's just words upon words upon words. I'll get it to you, you can use it, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. It's called the Return to Work Post-Coronavirus Checklist, and its first chapter, or its first heading, is Planning and Communication, and underneath that it has things that you can check off, like decide the right time to open, monitor federal, state, and local closing orders, identifying essential business functions and essential workers, determine a timeline, a return to work timeline. It just takes us step by step by step, little check boxes that help us say, man, do I have this? Do I need it? If I don't need it, I'll scratch it through. If I do need it, what do I have in place? Who's got the ball to do that? What resources do I need to make that thing happen? But the first heading is planning and communication. And there really is no greater thing you can do for your organization right now than these 2 things: plan and communicate. Develop a written protocol for confirmed or suspected COVID cases. Plan and develop a cleaning methodology. Plan and communicate your timeline on who's going to come to work. And as always, anticipate employee anxiety, anticipate rumors, anticipate misinformation, and plan accordingly. Leaders, be visible. Be out there in your workforce. Be out there with the truth. Be out there with the story. Be out there with what they all need to hear, and communicate ahead of time. I just sent out last Friday to the folks who are going to start to return to work here into our office over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks, and we are working on exactly the bring back timeline, who's coming back when. I've already sent ahead of that what our new protocol within the office will be. So nobody should show up for work on their first day going, I didn't know I needed to do that, or I didn't know you would have that in place. Communication is really going to be key, and putting communication out ahead of time is really going to be important. Second thing on the checklist will be workplace safety, and it's going to talk about reviewing the applicable OSHA and CDC standards, and we base a lot of our decisions here on what we do on CDC recommendations and CDC information. We don't base it on what's being talked about on the nightly news. We base it on what's being talked about in the CDC, and it gives us as organizations a really a great place to reground our information. Take steps that make the workplace more safe. And again, on the checklist, on the check sheet, it says, it's got a heading that says take steps to make the workplace more safe. To the extent possible, implement social distancing requirements, staggered shifts, staggered breaks, spacing between desks, community areas, limit in-person meetings, minimize physical contact, limit or close off gatherings in common areas. The checklist will take you through the things you can think about in your organization. Say, I wonder what we're going to do about that. Haven't thought of that. I wonder what we should do, and it will help you work through that. Consider whether face masks and gloves and those kinds of PPE are going to be mandatory or whether it's going to be optional. And if it's mandatory, how are you going to provide it and get enough resources to take care of that? If it's optional, how are they going to get them, and what masks and what PPE is going to be acceptable, or are you going to provide it? And you have to also ensure, the manufacturers, I'm talking specifically to you, we have to ensure that protective equipment doesn't otherwise pose a different kind of safety concern as far as entanglements or those kinds of things. So be very intentional about what you want to do with this. And this checklist will take us through that. So workplace safety, so planning and communication, workplace safety. It's going to take you through leaves of absences and workplace accommodations. We're going to spend more time on that with our HR folks this coming Friday, but the checklist lays out all of the concerns about what you should consider as you consider coming back to work. Teleworking issues, Can some remote work still continue even though you come back to work and you want to still maintain some distance by using the remote work? And have all the special accommodations under ADA been met by doing those kinds of things? This checklist will help work us through all of that. Employee benefits and compensations. It's the time to review. What are you going to do with health benefits? What are you going to do with call-in plans? What are you going to do with cafeteria plans? What are you going to do with any unused or flex spending? What's going to happen with any portion of the healthcare premiums while people were furloughed? Who's covering that? This checklist will help us as organizations sit with each other and say, man, we have to think about that. We have to know what we're going to do about that. And then the last one is employee morale. And one of the things the checklist will help do is create a communication plan. We have to communicate the steps the company is taking on a regular basis. We have to remind employees of the benefits that are offered, request feedback, address any health and safety concerns brought by employees promptly. All plays into morale. If somebody comes to you, and you're going to hear it, if you haven't yet, you're going to hear it say, I know you think I'm essential, but I'm too scared to come to work. I'm too nervous to come to work. I don't think you can provide a safe place for me. We have to think about all of those kinds of comments from a morale standpoint as well. I go back all the way back to what we said at the beginning of the conversation. People are coming to you with differing opinions, and once those things kind of start to fester a little bit, you can really have a struggle with employee morale. And I just want us to be very aware of this and remind employees that discrimination and retaliation is prohibited. It's prohibited by lots of things, and we have to stay aware of that. So that's what the checklist does for us. And I'm gonna, like I said, I'll make sure you all get that. And when you get that in your hands, if you want help deciphering any of it, just give me a call or an email. If you would like to have me, from a consulting standpoint, help you work through any of it and start creating your plan with you, let me know about that as well. And Sonia and Lorraine and myself will stand ready to help you create your plan if that would be the most help for you. So that's the checklist. You'll see that after the webinar is done. We'll send it to you. And then I've got this little visual here of the victory pose, right? And it's a call to victory, and to start thinking about us in terms of we will be victorious in what we're trying to do. Be purposeful. Constantly remind people of why you're in business and what we're doing. Be empathetic. Acknowledge other stress in the situation. You got to know that people are struggling. They're struggling with all kinds of things. And we get to be, as leaders, we get to be empathetic with that right now. And we get to show them that we are just as stressed as they are, and that we have to work through this thing together. And show them that we care not only about the enterprise, but we care about each person who works within the enterprise as well. Be empathetic. It's going to take you closer to victory. Be calm, be clear, be confident. Communicate with realness, communicate with clarity and authenticity and regularity. Tell the story. Put the vision of what this thing looks like. I read a great phrase here not too long ago. It says it's time to elevate from where we are now to where we're going to be next. And this is a great way to be confident when we think about the things we started out. What do they expect from us? Confidence and a plan and a vision. And this is really true as we think about this. Be action-oriented and reflective. Think about what we have to do to keep moving ourselves forward, but don't underestimate reflecting on where we are, what's gone on before, and what we have to keep in mind. Reflective and action-oriented. Don't be too passive. It was no big deal. Don't be so hyperactive that you're paralyzed, but create really good plans that take us forward with a defined action. Fifth one there is be inspiring. Share stories that reveal the endearing values. What's important to you? What's important to us as an organization? What's this enterprise and business for? Rally people around that instead of rallying people around, man, this whole experience has kind of sucked. Let's rally around what it is that makes this organization what it is and why we're here. Be resilient. Be resilient. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your energy, your wellness, your fitness. Encourage others to take care of themselves. Demonstrate it by modeling it. It takes so much energy, folks, doesn't it? So much energy to focus on all the things pandemic related that it just wears us out. It wears us out emotionally. It wears us out physically. It wears us out mentally. It just wears us out. So be resilient, take care of that energy, focus on the things that are going to take you forward, focus on the things that is going to take your employees and your workforce forward. Be aware of mindsets. Move from fixed and fear mindsets to growth mindsets. Remember what we said, that workforce is going to come in confused, perplexed, bewildered, lost, afraid, worried, nervous, and they can stay in that mindset. The more you can have the plan in place and articulate the plan, communicate the plan, the more you can take them from that fear mindset to a growth mindset. Next week, we're going to be here as an organization. Next month, we're going to be here as an organization. Next 6 months or next quarter, we're going to be here as an organization. And you start taking that into a growth mindset instead of a fear mindset, and that growth mindset will actually kind of breed optimism and start taking some of that fear out of the workforce. And the last thing on there that I'm just going to encourage us all to be is courageous. Be courageous. We have tough decisions to make right now as leaders, and we have tough decisions to make as businesses, and we have to make sure these decisions aren't being made on fear. They're being made with great information, and they have to be reactive, decisive moves that we're going to go forward with courage and inspire others with that courage, energy, and positivity. And for some of you who may know me, and some of you do know me, I don't live in a Pollyanna world of unrealistic expectations, but I do live in a world of optimism and courage that as leaders we can take our workforce someplace different if we exhibit those kinds of characteristics, even as we plan things like safety protocol. I can't stress enough how much our employees and incoming returning workforce are going to appreciate a good a well thought out safety protocol above all things to help alleviate fears. So, all right, so that's kind of my conversation for the morning, gang. And if you and I do thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have this conversation. It's a conversation that means a lot to me, and we're going to continue having the conversation in a variety of ways over the next couple of weeks. This Friday, Sonia will join me again, and we'll talk some more about the HR aspects of it and the operational aspect. And you'll see some emails on there, some ways to contact Lorraine, my training partner, Sonia, our HR consultant, Anna Nichols, our events coordinator, and helps keep all of your requests situated, and then myself if there are any questions. So there you have it. Troy, is there anything that's popped up that needs to be or would like to be answered?
Yeah, thank you, John. And I'll do one here, and then I'll let Phil come in because I'm sure Phil has some comments he'd like to make. But one question we've got a lot over the last several weeks, and I know you're a little limited on what you might be able to say, but there's a lot of talk amongst employers about employees who have been laid off and are making more on unemployment than they would be back in the workplace. And how do you approach that as a business in talking to your employees and getting them to come back into the workplace?
Yeah, it is a conversation that comes up and a question that comes up pretty frequently. And again, the whole unemployment question is, the businesses aren't making decisions about unemployment. The unemployment agency is making decisions about who's eligible for unemployment and eligible for what. But as the work becomes available again, as the workplace makes the decisions that the work is available again, you make that statement known to your employees that work's available and we need you to come back. If they make that decision of, I'd rather stay on unemployment or whatever that is, the information, the conversation's kind of over right there, right? And you just tell the unemployment agency that you made the return to work offer and the worker chose not to, and it's going to eventually kind of sort itself out. And I don't say that to be harsh or anything else. But we have to understand that unemployment and especially the unemployment package that's out there right now is meant to help through the situation, to be a stopgap, and certainly not meant to be a permanent condition. So my suggestion there is, be as decisive as you can about this is our return to work, and you have now been told you can return to work, and we're going to submit that information to the unemployment.
Bill, we do have another question here, but I wanted to bring you in on some of your thoughts on this after listening to John and some of the things that came through here today.
John, I think if we could all open our mics, we'd all be applauding because you did a fabulous job of
Thank you.
a kind of an overview of the right way to approach this, which is that the purpose of your organization and the reason that you're working, it's really a high importance in terms of the motivation to think and care when you may have been going through various difficulties during this time. And you did a fabulous job of that. And we really appreciate your willingness to send out that checklist and then open up those other opportunities for our businesses to learn that you're going to have. And I think one thing I'd ask you to talk about just a little bit, depending on the media sources that we've been using and what we've been getting, we might have wildly varying perspectives on what's been happening here and what's appropriate. As it's gotten more and more political and kind of the nature of us, particularly business owners, we tend to be type A's, gung-ho, let's go get them and let's charge that hill. And so how do you, when you're that kind of person, and how tough it's been to keep the business afloat during a time like this, how do you approach them in that caring, empathetic way? And how do you put yourself in their shoes a little bit? Do you have any techniques you'd recommend?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. Many of us are in the positions we're in and doing what we do because we kind of do charge that hill, take no prisoners kind of thought process as we drive our own businesses forward. And I always like to have something to come back to and ground ourselves to. And in this case, because there is wildly different opinions, there is a lot of political charge to the conversations and all of that stuff. If we can ground ourselves back to what does the CDC recommend from a really an apolitical standpoint, and what is really at the heart of doing the best thing that we can do for our employees and for our workforce, we can kind of supersede all of that conversation, and we can really, in a way to be caring and empathetic, is to bring them into the conversation as early as you can about where you're going forward with your organization, with your company. We didn't create and make our companies without the help of employees around us. Why would a restart be any different than that? It's kind of what goes through my mind. And if we can put together a really good plan, and I can't emphasize enough how important it is to spend time in the next couple of weeks planning this move so it doesn't become politically charged, so it doesn't become overridden with opinions and ideas outside of where it should. The more we can plan, the more we can communicate, the earlier we can bring our employees into it, the more they are going to say, it matters. It matters to them, it matters to me, because what I'm saying matters to them, right? Just bring them into it. Bring them into it, right?
Thank you. That's a great answer.
And thank you, John, for that. I do want to encourage anybody who has questions, please type them into the question section here. One question we got has to do with employee differences in coming back. What is your advice if you have employees that want to come back and be in the office, but have concerns about other coworkers returning as well? So you're going to have situations where I want to be back, but I'm not sure that I want 17 other people back.
Yeah, that's going to become one of the leading questions, and honestly, we're experiencing it and living through it within our own office and our own organization now. And this is, again, come back to a plan that you can put out there to everybody as early as you can that's solid enough to give them confidence that they're going to be okay. And in some cases, and if you would look at what our office looks like today is what it looked like 2 weeks ago, you would notice the differences that are out there. We've done things like separated cubicles and put up guards between cubicles. We've eliminated seats in conference rooms so you can't sit any closer than 6 feet apart. We have to convey a confidence to those who want to come back but are reluctant to come back, that there's something in place that's going to keep them safe as much as we possibly can. The other thing that I want to suggest always is to be as equitable with the deploying of these plans as you can. It can't be okay for one group to have to wear a mask and not okay for another group to have to wear a mask. You know what I'm saying? We have to be consistent in the way that we apply this stuff. for the very reason you're talking about, that if the first time somebody who's feeling a little bit reluctant about coming back shows up to the place of work and 3 people that they have to interact with aren't being held to the rules of wearing a mask, the confidence starts to erode. So I really want to stress again, stick to the facts as much as you can. Create the safety protocol plan that provides as much confidence in the safety for everybody as you can. Communicate that out there to your people as early and as often as you can, and listen to their fears. If somebody's going to call you up and say, I just can't. I'm so worried about those other 4 people who have to share my space that I can't come back into work. Listen to that, address the need, address the fear, be caring and empathetic to that, and either make an arrangement where they're not going to be in that condition, or allow them to continue to work from home, or put in such a robust safety protocol that the fear kind of gets taken away.
Thank you, John. We're down to just a couple more minutes left here, so I want to give you a chance for some final thoughts, and then I'll bring Phil in to close it out.
And again, don't underestimate the power of a good plan right now. Don't underestimate using the time between now and your startup to get together and wrestle this stuff to the ground. Don't be intimidated by that. Things like this checklist and that OSHA document and some resources like myself and others, don't be intimidated by it, and spend the time to do it and do it well, and you'll be okay. You'll be fine. And again, Phil, Troy, BBB in general, all of you, thank you so much for allowing me the chance this morning, the opportunity to speak with you, and don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, John. And I think I'd just like to reiterate how important trust is to the success and ongoing sustainability of your business. And when you lose trust, how difficult it is to win it back. So in every part of this that John just talked about, you're going to increase your level of trust with your employees and your customers by planning it out and thinking it through and including and understanding what people are telling you and being really thoughtful and not knee-jerk about this process. It is essential to the success of your business that you as a leader and the way your organization is run is trusted. And John, thanks so much for helping us understand how we can do that a lot better.
My pleasure.
We wish everybody well, and in any way that BBB can help, please let us know. We're here for you, and we want to be there to assist you as you get your business to a position of strength and better than ever. Take care, everybody.